As Israel faces the heat for its operations in Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu has tweeted, and this is part of our Motorola India's best 5G smartphone brands tweet of the day.
Hello, Moto.
This is what the Israeli Prime Minister has said, and I quote, "It is not Israel that is deliberately targeting civilians, but Hamas that beheaded, burned and massacred civilians in the worst horrors perpetrated on the Jews since the Holocaust." Now, while Israel is doing everything to keep civilians out of harm's way, Hamas is doing everything to keep them in harm's way. Now, Israel provides civilians in Gaza humanitarian corridors and safe havens. Hamas prevents them from leaving at gunpoint. It is Hamas and not Israel that should be held accountable for committing a double war crime, targeting civilians while at the same time hiding behind civilians. The forces of civilization must back Israel in defeating Hamas barbarism. All right, let's go straight across to our big debate. Does the Al-Shifa hospital raid expose Hamas's human shield theory, or is it a sign of excesses by the Israeli Defense Forces? That's our debate topic tonight.
Hello, Moto.
All right, Danny Ayalon is a former Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, and Dalal IRIQAT is a columnist who supports the Palestinian cause and Palestine. Let me start with you, Dalal IRIQAT. You just heard from Avi Hyman, who is the Israeli Prime Minister's advisor and spokesperson. You also heard from Netanyahu himself saying that if Israel is accused of attacks against civilians and violation of the Geneva Conventions in this target of the Al-Shifa hospital, what would you say of Hamas using human shields and Hamas deliberately holding people in that hospital without allowing them to flee? Isn't that too a war crime?
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start with Netanyahu's headline as he's bringing the Holocaust back to our scenes in 2023. The Holocaust is the saddest tragedy, the human tragedy of the 20th century. And yes, never again for all of humanity, never again for all religions, all colors, or ideologies. The Israeli people should be the first ones to be ashamed of the Israeli military occupation, raids and incursions and shellings and bombings of civilians. Going back to the hospital, yes, the Israeli investigation intelligence have been working so hard, putting a lot of effort and investments to produce what they had brought to the world to justify, targeting the hospitals and the civilians and the patients in Gaza. Thank you. This is their own investigation, internal investigation. I want to speak now to the minds of the Indian audience and to the minds of any conscious people. There is consensus in the international system that the jurisdiction, the legal jurisdiction, the people who are entitled to rule are the ICC, the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court, Karim Khan and his investigation teams are very ready. They actually flew to the border. Netanyahu did not let them in. If we want to respect accountability, and I am for accountability for anybody who commits any crimes, if we want to hold Hamas or Netanyahu or anybody, or if we want to label them as criminals, then we have to let in and we have to accept a civilized, peaceful and legal tool, and to let a third party.
No, but ma'am, are you suggesting that Hamas has not built tunnels under the hospital, that Hamas is not using civilians as human shields, that it's not holding people at gunpoint? I mean, forget about its own people at gunpoint. There are 200 plus hostages that Hamas has in its custody. And it's been over a month. It's been 40 days now. Why didn't they release them as a goodwill gesture? And then perhaps the Israeli side and the international community will meet them halfway for whatever their demands are. But to say that any organization which still has human hostages in its custody 40 days on after the horrific October 7th terror attacks that it carried out, to say that they should be judged by ICC standards or they should be judged by, international observers, I mean, that just defies logic.
That justifies logic, legal and peaceful tools. And let me tell you one thing. We cannot justify that the oppressor is actually bringing about an investigation over the oppressed. And you're speaking about a Marshall Plan. We should really, in 2023, we need wisdom. We need people who care for the strategic existence of Israel and for the peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis alike. Speaking about a Marshall Plan, we need to learn from history. We need not to repeat history, but to really avoid the atrocities that the humanity is suffering. There are more than 1,000 Palestinian kidney failure patients in Gaza who cannot do dialysis because of the shortage of fuel. There are 9,000 Palestinian cancer patients in Gaza who cannot get their treatment. More than 130 premature babies.
Let me ask Danny Ayalon this. Danny Ayalon, it's not correct to expect that Israel be held to the same standards as that of an avowed terrorist organization. Israel is a responsible member of the Committee of Nations, is a member of the United Nations. It has to abide by the rules of war. And the rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, are absolutely clear. No civilian in any direct fashion should be targeted. And targeting a hospital is a war crime.
Well, I will tell you that this is actually the easiest debate I've ever been to. It's almost embarrassing because it's a no-brainer. First of all, you have all the evidence. Dalal is talking about some inquiry. It's not Israel. We have the international press seeing what we see. So how can you deny that Hamas has not turned Gaza into one big bunker holding hostages and human shields 2 million people of Gaza? How can you not see that the underground bunkers and tunnels under hospitals, under mosques, this is all evident. I don't think we even have to debate it. It's embarrassing to even talk about it. It's a fact. Now, when you talk about Geneva Convention, then what the war crime is not only to shell civilians, as the Hamas does indiscriminately, shelling on Israeli towns, but also to use individuals and civilians as human shields. This is what the Hamas is doing. So if Hamas is taking a hospital and making it a bunker and a military target from which they launch missiles, from which they shoot at our soldiers, it becomes, listen to that, according to the Geneva Convention, it becomes a legitimate military target. Even though Israel did not indiscriminately bomb the Shifa, we did not go down and ruin it. We went in a very painstaking way, in a very precise operation, which put our soldiers at risk. And this is what we're doing. We're routing out the evil of the terror of Hamas, which is like ISIS, and they have no shame of going into hospitals, taking patients, taking babies in incubators.
But Mr. Ayalon, I come back to that point. Israel has to hold a higher standard. You cannot expect a nation state that is part of the Committee of Global Nations, a responsible member, to be held to the same standard as that of a terrorist organization, avowedly. The point is that the Geneva Conventions are very clear. You cannot target civilians in a direct fashion. And there is also the Convention of Proportionality. Yes, 1,400 Israelis died. And, we here in India were the first ones to join you in this hour of grief. We know what it means to lose people to terrorism. But that does not mean that the Israeli forces go in, and as per the Ministry of Health in Gaza, their estimates is that 10,000 people have died, a majority of them women and children.
So let me mention that this Ministry of Health, the so-called Ministry of Health in Gaza, is under Hamas hands. Hamas perpetrated a coup d'etat, and they threw out the Palestinian Authority in 2007. And they have turned Gaza into a terror entity and into a place where they are killing people, their own and also ours. So Geneva Convention is very clear again. I will take you, I'm not comparing myself or Israel into the terrorists. Of course, they are despicable. But you have countries like the United States, like the Allied, the UK and others who acted in Fallujah and Mosul in Iraq in a way which was, I said to say, much more brutal than the IDF. They took out hospitals, and it was all according to the Geneva Convention. Again, I say, when the terrorists make a hospital into a military bunker, it becomes a legitimate target. And even though Israel is not targeting it indiscriminately, we are not bombing it. We are not throwing bombs from the air. We are not using artillery. We are going very, very precisely, taking a lot of risk for our own soldiers. And if you see, all the casualties on the other side were of terrorists. We came in with incubators.